All right, I think we're going to get started. There's another meeting after this, so we need to get going. So we have some time for questions and all that as well. My name is Alex Walker. I work over there in the Development Center as a plan examiner. I've been issuing building permits for the city. And so I've been tasked with charging or coming up with a series for public outreach so we can understand how the development process works. Today we have the Plan Commission, Board of Zoning, and licensing. There were some other topics, but we didn't want to squish too many things into one session. So I'll be having those at a later point in time. Here is Dancia. She has a few words she would like to say.
Hi, I'm Dancia Stronghill, Executive Director of LIST Milwaukee. We're delighted to partner with our Common Council acre graduates, Alderwoman Malala Coggs, Alderman Rainey, and Alderman Perez, as well as the commissioners of DCD and DNS. This is designed so that acre graduates and others really get to know the people in the city who are making, who are doing the work, so you can establish a face-to-face relationship. But also, our graduates are in many positions in community development and government. And so when we were asked by the alders to work with the city to do this, we were really pleased to do so. We're pleased to announce that October 2nd, we will be initiating the next Acre 1 class. Applications should be available on our website. There are some in our offices in the common area when you walk in, and it's open until the 15th. Not a very long application. I think probably the most time-consuming thing will be getting your letters of recommendation. So with that, Alderwoman Coggs would like to say a few words.
Thank you. I first want to say thank you all for coming out. And a lot of times you plan stuff, put stuff together, but it doesn't really matter if the people who the information was designed to help enrich are not present to benefit from it. So I first want to thank you all for taking time out of what I'm sure is your busy schedule to gain this information here today. Myself, Alderman Rainey, Alderman Perez had the benefit of going through the ACRE program prior to us becoming Alder people. The knowledge and information we gained through that program has helped guide us as members of this council, and now Alderman Rainey is the chair of zoning and development. I also sit on that committee, and Alderman Perez is extremely involved with the development in his district and in other parts of the city. But what we continuously find is that people oftentimes have difficulty navigating through the city systems of what's necessary to help you to develop. So we fought along with DNS, DCD, and LIST about the ways in which we could help aid in giving out the information to help it be a little bit easier to navigate through those systems. And this Lunch and Learn series is our personal staff at trying to make sure that one, relationships are gained between people and the city workers who do this work, and two, that you know the process and the systems to make it easier. We truly believe, myself, Perez, and Alderman Rainey, that downtown is being developed, and that's great, but our neighborhoods and the rest of the city needs to be developed too, and that's primarily going to happen from people from those neighborhoods. But those people from those neighborhoods need to know how to navigate through the city system. So we hope that you use the information that you gain here today, and that you make some connections, not only with the city workers who will present to you today, but also with each other, because many of you already do real estate things in the community as well, and that hopefully, a time from now, there will be results throughout the city that we can say, some of these people came to the Lunch and Learn and learned something that helped them to complete a project out here in the community. So all I ask is that you learn something today and share it with someone else when you need it. Thank you.
Our first presenter is Kristen. She'll be talking about the Plan Commission.
Okay, I'm going to do a really brief overview of the City Plan Commission and then also focus in on a couple of the file types like zoning items that come before City Plan Commission as well. I'm Kristen Connelly. I'm a principal planner with the Department of City Development's Planning Division. City Plan Commission is staffed by the Department of City Development Planning Division. So it's a recommending body, and it's made up of 7 citizen members that are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Common Council. And it advises the Common Council on a number of land development topics, some of what you see here. And the ones that are highlighted in orange I'll go into in a little bit more detail. Since City Plan Commission is a recommending body, we're not the final say. So we do take a look at these land development topics from a variety of standpoints, and then make a recommendation to a council committee, and then the files continue on in most cases to Common Council as well. So process for approval, I'm now going to hone in a little bit on 3 tools that we use to help facilitate development. So if a site is ripe for development but may not have the correct zoning in place, sometimes a zoning change is required. And that can either be a normal zoning change or to a planned development, which I'll get into in more detail, a custom zoning. Another tool we have is zoning overlays. And in those cases, the base zoning still works for the most part, but we want to hone in on some specific uses or design details to target a specific kind of development. So what does that process look like? Generally, a file is introduced after an application is submitted to us in planning. File introduced to the Common Council. It then goes to the City Plan Commission, where a public hearing is held. And per state statute, we notice property owners within 200 feet of the affected boundary. From there, City Plan Commission makes its recommendation to that Zoning, Neighborhoods, and Development Committee that Alderwoman Cogs just mentioned previously, where a second public hearing is held. So because these zoning changes change land use and they change what you can do, it's very important to get that public hearing process available to the public. So these meetings are open for anybody to come to, even if you don't receive the notice because you're not that property owner within 200 feet. After Z&D hears the file, it then goes to full Common Council. Once a zoning overlay is established, just to get a little bit more in the weeds, any project within an overlay then goes back to City Plan Commission in a streamlined approval process, just to have the City Plan Commission basically confirm that what they want to do is permitted per those approved overlay standards. So honing in a little bit more, a zoning change may be necessary when, for example, there's like mixed zoning on several sites that you want to use as a development site, and something is necessary in order to facilitate that development. Some things that we consider when someone approaches us for a zoning change is, what is the comprehensive plan for that area envision? So everywhere in the city is covered by an area plan, and in that area plan are recommendations that were a result of a couple years of public input. So we want to make sure that if somebody wants to change what was contemplated for the site at that time, the recommendations support that. We also look at surrounding land uses and neighboring context as well. An example of this zoning change was actually done by an acre grad, Q, at 32nd and Center. And a normal zoning change is when you basically go from one chapter of the zoning code, so for example, commercial, your zone commercial, and you want to flip over to the next chapter to go to industrial instead. So you're staying within that zoning code, you don't have your specific plans approved, you're simply changing the rules that you're looking at from one chapter to another. In this specific example, there were several buildings involved in the zoning change that went from industrial light and industrial heavy to industrial mixed. And the reason for that was because they wanted to include a broader range of uses such as commercial and residential that industrial mixed offered. So again, it's the 2 to 3 month process. And then once your zoning is changed, you're basically following that new column of the zoning code that you're now adhering to. And if you don't meet the zoning, then your variance process is through the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is what you'll hear about in a few minutes. Instead of just going to a normal zoning change, sometimes unique circumstances do require a planned development or planned unit development, as you may know. And that's a site-specific custom zoning. So it runs with the land for a period of 5 years from approval. There was just a zoning code text change to approve about a year ago that basically said if you don't construct what you were approved to do in 5 years, you'll revert back to another zoning district, so that you're not hanging out there with a custom zoning for the site that just may not be feasible any longer. So again, we always consider the comprehensive plan recommendations surrounding land use, neighboring context. But with this one, we do approve specific plans. And the reason for that is because you're no longer referring to the zoning code for your use list or your design standards such as setbacks, building height. You're creating that custom zoning yourself. So staff works with the applicant to create that custom zoning where basically your site plan is your zoning. The setbacks that are listed are what you have to do. The uses that you state in the narrative are what you have to have. Your building elevations, including building materials, again, are what you have to construct. So it creates that predictability for the surrounding neighbors, but it also allows a unique development to go forward under that permitted zoning. Creating it is very flexible because you have the ability to set your own standards based on your unique circumstances. But once that's approved, if you want to change something, depending on the varying degree of change, you have to go back through that whole process again through City Plan Commission, Z&D, and Common Council to have your zoning catch up with the changes that you want to do. So just to kind of budget in the time if you do want to make changes after it's approved. And here's an example by another Acre grad, the Griot. Finally, I mentioned the zoning overlay as a tool to target development in cases where there's mostly like a master developer for a large boundary. And the base zoning, so that zoning code, mostly works in terms of uses, design standards. But we want to further target or tweak those standards a little bit more to really focus on a particular development type. We have 6 or 7 different kinds of overlays in the city. Our most common being site plan review overlays, such as the downtown Riverwalk. Development incentive zone is another kind of overlay, and that changes your uses and design standards. Examples of this are Midtown Center, the old Capitol Court. So that's when it was redone, basically the base zoning, again, there mostly worked, but we wanted to make sure that the uses allowed were more focused on commercial, retail, and uses that support that kind of district. So once an overlay is established, which goes before that whole Common Council public hearing process, then, like I mentioned previously, once projects are ready to move forward within that boundary, it's a very quick, streamlined process, one stop to City Plan Commission to make sure that you're meeting the intent of those overlay standards. And where the overlay maybe doesn't talk about something, so for instance, if it doesn't talk about setbacks, then you still look at that base zoning for your other rules. And another example of a development incentive zone, or DIZ, is the Brewery Project, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And it's been very successful in creating a great, basically a new neighborhood in Milwaukee. And that's really all I have. I have a couple helpful links here in terms of the City Plan Commission website. When we have plan developments going before the commission, we always upload the exhibits, which entails a narrative that backs up like the whole detailed drawing set. We always upload them to the page about a week and a half before the meeting. You can always email the City Plan Commission at planadmin@milwaukee.gov, and I get that email and we forward it along to the commissioners. You can sign up for e-Notify to receive agendas, and I know on previous presentations they've offered this website as well, but it really does help you to stay informed. And then you can always watch the meetings live on Channel 25. And I have a couple links there in terms of how to access the zoning change applications, that processing schedule, and then the actual zoning overlays that I briefly mentioned here. So, any questions? Yes?
Do the overlays set precedent for future projects?
They guide future projects. So for example, when the Brewery Project Development Incentive Zone was established, it was at the beginning of that whole development. So in terms of creating the predictability of what uses and certain design standards such as higher quality signage, I guess in that sense it does, because it creates those rules that everyone in the future will have to follow within that boundary. I don't know if that gets to your, or another way to rephrase it.
It's good to know.
Okay. And then like the Riverwalk, I guess, does also, because it creates precedent for keeping an active pedestrian realm along the river.
Right.
So those rules have to be followed to create a certain environment. That was the intent of the overlay when it was established.
Next will be Board of Zoning.
arrow. Yeah, you just did like the arrow.
If you have an empty seat next to you, can you raise your hand?
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Thomas. I am the administrative coordinator for the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I will try to keep this pretty short and sweet. I know we are a little strapped for time. And what I tried to do was just create kind of a step-by-step process to really simplify from A to Z, from when you walk in the door to when you actually go to an actual hearing and receive an approval from the board. So we will go through that today. So what is the Board of Zoning Appeals? The Board of Zoning Appeals is authorized by state statute, city ordinance to hear appeals and matters related to all zoning ordinances. When applying for an occupancy permit to open a business, you may be informed that a special use or variance approval from BOZA is required before the issuance of that actual permit. So, step one. The appeals process begins by being denied by a plan examiner. So I put that in bold because one misconception is we are an appeals board. So if you are not technically denied by a plan examiner, one of which is Alex, then you are not appealing anything to our office. So that is your first step. Your first step is you're applying for an occupancy permit. So you must meet with the plan examiner at the development center, apply for a permit. When you meet with that plan examiner, you'll present your plans if they are available, and you will discuss your proposal. If your proposal is identified as a special use or use that's not permitted by the zoning code, then that plan examiner will not be able to grant you the permit. So essentially they will refer you to our office. So if you're denied that permit, you have the right to appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they will provide you what's called a referral letter. That letter basically indicates what you would be appealing to the board. That's how we understand what your proposal would be, what type of business, and what you need in order for you to get that occupancy permit. Step two. You will prepare your application and supporting plans and materials for our office. So if anyone has never been to 809 North Broadway, the way the building is set up on the first floor, you walk in, you essentially go to the front desk, sign in and speak with the plan examiner. At that point, you apply for your occupancy permit. If you can't receive it, they will refer you to our office, which is conveniently right across from them. So you simply would just walk over, and then we will explain these following steps. So we give you our submittal requirements, which may include, we have an application form, an affidavit, there's a $100 filing fee with the submittal. Proof of interest in the land would be whether you own the property, that would be a deed. You could lease or have a land contract. Photos of the outside of the property, floor plan, site plan. Plan of operation just explains your specific business, your actual proposal, whether it's a special use or a variance. That would determine whether you would submit to us a statement of special use or variance. Depending on the application, you may need sign plans, landscaping plan, a survey, or building elevations when dealing with new construction. So depending on that type of appeal, you may or may not need all of those materials, but at the time that you actually come in our office, then we can explain which of those materials you'll need. One thing you will need, though, to apply to our office, we do have to have a $100 filing fee, and that would go toward your total fee, which we determine once the application is reviewed. So, step three. We, in the Board of Zoning Appeals office, once you submit those materials to us, we will then process your application. So, representative of the board, which will be myself, we have a representative of Department of City Development, Neighborhood Services, and Public Works that we get together and we review your applications. That is called the Zoning Administration Group, ZAG for short. So the purpose of ZAG is to provide the applicant and the board with any technical information, and we narrow down any issues that may be that we can get through before it actually goes before a hearing. So we identify any possible problems, And once we review your application, if it's determined that we need more information, or if there are just some questions or something isn't clear, then we will send you a letter requesting additional information. And I put in bold here that any delay in responding to requests for additional information could delay your appeal down the road. So that is very important. Once the administration group reviews the application, it's difficult to determine whether we're going to ask for additional information when you submit the application. So this is a very important step. And when we send those letters, the quicker we receive a response, then the quicker you're able to be eligible for an actual schedule to be on a hearing. So step 4, after that point, if your application is deemed complete, then if you wish to proceed, we will then send you a notice, and it will have those additional fees attached to it. So the $100 filing fee that you pay when you submitted your application will go towards that total balance. So basically, when you return that fee, you can do that via mail or in person, and you pay that remaining balance. Then at that point, your application is complete, and you're eligible to be scheduled for a hearing. Before that actual hearing, what we do is we send out notices to property owners, just like City Plan Commission. For special uses, they're within 200 feet of any property owners from that specific premise. Any type of variance or dimensional variance would be 150 feet from that actual property. And that notice that you would receive as the applicant, also property owners within those distances will have the description of the appeal, have the date and the time listed for the actual hearing, and also the location, which is always in City Hall, either this room 301B or 301A. And that leads us to step 5. So this is the actual public hearing. At the public hearing, the board itself reviews the materials, staff reports any written letters or documents that we have received at that point from those notices being sent out to property owners to that actual hearing date. The board will take testimony from public hearing items, from also any interested parties. So this is a public hearing where there is no restriction on who can actually attend. It's open to the public, and essentially everyone is invited. We do have 2 sections that I wanted to speak on the actual agenda. So we have one part of the agenda that's called the consent agenda, in which that means the administration group, once we review all the applications, we will determine if there are some that are being recommended for approval. Then what happens is we'll have a period of time that that recommendation goes. For instance, it may be 5 years for a special use, 10 years for a dimensional variance. It may be to run with the land. And those are read at the beginning of the actual hearing. So those particular items, there's no testimony taken because staff is recommending approval. If we do receive any type of objection or any letter, any email, or if someone were to show up to the hearing and have an objection, then what we'd have to do is adjourn that to another hearing, because at that point we had it only scheduled to be approved. We didn't have any time allocated for any testimony. The other portion of the agenda is the public hearing agenda, and that's where individual items are read off and they're heard individually. And we usually give about 5 to 10 minutes for any presentations or any questions that the board may have for the applicant. And those, again, if we have someone in support or in objection to that appeal, they have the opportunity to speak and explain that to the board. And our last step would be, assuming you are approved by the board, you would receive a verbal decision at the time of the hearing. And from that verbal decision, we do have to create an actual written decision. That written decision usually takes about a week from the actual hearing date. And then that is mailed out to the applicant. So if it is approved, you receive that written decision within a week from that actual hearing date. Now, I put this in bold as well to please remember that the Board of Zoning Appeals decision is not a permit. You may or may not be surprised how many times people think that once they have gone through the BOZA process, then they're done. We're what I would call the middleman. So we are a step before the ending. So after you receive an approval from the board, you still have to get that actual occupancy permit. That is what your initial goal is. So from the beginning to when you apply for that permit with the permit center, and they refer you to us because they can't issue you the permit without Board of Zoning approval, you get that approval, but that is not your last step. Your next step is to make sure you have all inspections done that may have been presented to you at the time you apply for the occupancy permit, and that is what you would need to complete and get that actual permit from the development center. Also, just a note, if the application is actually denied by the board, you do have the right to appeal that denial. That appeal, though, you would need to do within 30 days, and that goes through circuit court. That does not go through our office of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So you have 30 days from the date of the written decision, and we usually say if anyone has any questions in that regard to essentially seek either a legal professional or someone that would have more knowledge of that circuit court process. So that is pretty much a step-by-step basis from A to Z, from when you walk in the door to you actually receiving your permit. A couple other things I wanted to go into. So typically, your appeal will either consist of a special use or a variance. So there are different criteria that are needed for you to explain to the board how you're going to meet those criteria in order to be approved. So for a special use, this is the statement of special use. There's 4 separate criteria. I won't go into all of them specifically, but we have protection of public health, safety, and welfare. Essentially, your business, you're explaining how that is not going to have a negative effect on the neighborhood or community. Protection of property, that would be the property itself that you are proposing, as well as neighboring properties, how you are not going to diminish any property value or have a negative effect of other property owners as well. Traffic and pedestrian safety, obviously you want to explain how your proposal is not going to increase the traffic to the point where it could be a nuisance to that area or that community. Also, consistency with the comprehensive plan. That goes along with, like we said, with city plan. There are plans for specific areas in the city, and you would explain in your own words how your actual business will fit into that plan. And also the statement of variance, this is separate criteria, and this goes for whether it be a use variance or a dimensional variance. We have preservation of intent, which just basically means what you're proposing just isn't inconsistent with the purpose and the spirit of the code. So when you ask for a variance, you're essentially asking, this is prohibited technically by the code, and you're saying, I need a special approval because this does not fit what I am doing, but what I'm doing is consistent with this area. Also, we have exceptional circumstances where if there's for some reason a particular building or a particular use works in a building, but for some reason the code has that as prohibited, you have to explain what are your exceptional circumstances. Preservation of property rights. This is kind of goes along with protection of property, and with you want to explain how your proposal, if it were to be denied, you're not able to use your property the way you should be able to. Absence of detriment, basically it just won't create any detriment to any adjacent property, any property owners as well. And the hardship is just making sure that this is not self-imposed. So we always tell everyone it can't be on economic grounds. You can't say, hey, I need this approval because this is costing me money or this will make me money. That is not a reason to get an actual approval from the board. And this is not as clear as I would like it to be, but this is our zoning calendar. So what we do is when you come in, we give you a calendar and explain the actual dates. So we have 12 dates in a year, 2 of which are in 1 month because Common Council is on recess in August, so we don't have an actual hearing in the month of August. So we have a list of dates, and then also we have approximate deadline dates for application submittals. So I just wanted to highlight with our calendar, we tell everyone that comes in our deadline dates. We do try to accommodate according to them. It's about a 4 to 6 week process, typically, if everything goes smooth. but sometimes it does not for various reasons. So we can't guarantee specific hearing dates. We do have approximate deadline dates to submit your application, just to give us time to review it. If we have any questions or we need any additional information, then we can let you know, and hopefully in that time you get that information back and we're able to schedule it for a hearing. But we just want to make sure we explain to everyone it's not necessarily a guarantee that if you submit by a specific date that your case will be scheduled for a specific hearing. So we just suggest that the sooner the better. You know, the sooner you get the information to us, the sooner we can get it processed, and hopefully the sooner you can be scheduled for a hearing date. And the last thing is just our contact info. Like I said, we're located on the first floor. We do answer our phones, so you can give us a call. And as well as on our website, milwaukee.gov/BOZA, we do have a lot of the application materials. So you're able to pull off the application form, affidavit. You're able to actually fill in statement of special use and variance. If you don't want to do it on a separate document, you're able to do that and print that off. As well as any questions or any concerns, you can email us as well. Lastly, I just want to show you our handy dandy blue booklet. So this is what we give everyone when you come into the office. And this is really a guide and step-by-step on how to submit your application, all the information needed. It gives examples in physical form in this booklet. Usually what we'll do is we have a list on the back that will highlight each individual item that you'll need for your specific application. And any questions that you may have, we always suggest giving us a call or sending an email, and we definitely try to get that answered within the day or as soon as possible. So I don't know if you want to have questions now or later.
Questions after. We have one more presentation, the licensing.
Okay. I'm Jessica Salella, the manager of the license division. I'm also joined by our assistant manager, Yashika Bird, at the end of the table over there if you have any questions afterwards. We're downstairs on the first floor here of City Hall, so the two previous speakers are on the first floor across the street. We're on the first floor in this building. Just as a brief rundown of what our department does, we are the first stop for a lot of new businesses. We also provide information to the public about license matters, people who have applied for businesses or public hearings. And then we also do sit at all of the license committee hearings, and we are at most of the common council meetings as well to support the licenses committee, which we'll get into a little bit later here. We license probably close to 100 types of businesses. Not every type of business requires a license through us, but a lot of them do. The most common ones that we handle are bars and restaurants, convenience stores, gas stations, used car lots, salvage yards, and secondhand stores. Many of these businesses do go through the BOZA process before they come to us, so that's why we presented after BOZA today, because often you'll need to speak with them before you come handle your license application. So like I said, we license about 100 different types of businesses. The process isn't identical for every single one. That's because, running a bar is a little bit different than running a taxi business. There's different types of inspections or review that needs to happen. But we're gonna go kind of through the general process, and then we can narrow it down to questions if you have specific business types. Generally, you'll start your application in our office. We do have several staff downstairs who will review applications with you, let you know if there are other licenses that you might need. They'll go through actually all of the questions with you to ensure that you've answered everything correctly or you haven't missed anything. And then once your application is submitted, they'll go through your specific license process with you. Once your application is submitted, there is a lot of public notification that comes out through our office. Any member of the public can sign up for e-Notify to be noticed of business applications in their area. Alcohol applications are also published in the Daily Reporter every week. So if you're a new or renewing your alcohol business for a bar, restaurant, liquor store, That information is going in the newspaper as well. And then for many types of businesses, we do notice a 250-foot radius of neighbors to let everyone in the area know that this new business is applying. So once your application is submitted to our office, we send it out to other departments for their review. This is the part where it varies depending on your license, but for the most part, applications will go through 4 different departments: the police department, the Department of Neighborhood Services, the health department, and then your local common council representative will also review your application. We're going to start with the most difficult process is the police report. It takes a little bit more effort on your part as the applicant than some of the other departments. About half of the licenses that our office issues require fingerprinting. That's done at the Police Administration Building downtown. There's a division of the police department called the License Investigation Unit, and they handle all of the licensing process. So they'll take your fingerprints, they do the background checks for your license, they answer questions about your license. So you'll get fingerprinted if required. If you're applying for an alcohol license, so you're starting a restaurant that wants to serve alcohol or a grocery store that has alcohol, you'll need to do a telephone interview with the License Investigation Unit. And then you also have to be a state of Wisconsin resident, so they'll go through some residency requirements with you. Then every single person who is on the application will need to go through a background check. They basically just run for the last 10 years of your background and then compile all of that information that gets sent to us. The license premises reports, or PA-33s, people may see in their license file sometimes. Those are reports that are specific to the location that you're applying for. So if you're applying for a new bar or restaurant that has been a business before, the License Investigation Unit will compile all of the past reports to give the community a feel for what has happened at this location in the past. The last step, which is mostly for alcohol businesses, but any business can actually request through the License Investigation Unit, is the Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design Survey, or CPTED is a little bit easier to say. The police district in your area will actually send a community liaison officer out to your proposed establishment, or if you're an existing business owner, they'll come out and do this as well. They review all of the security for your business and make suggestions. So, if you have a camera in one area, they might suggest to go in a different area, or they might suggest different security measures that'll help you with your business. So the application gets queued to the police department. Once you've finished all of your requirements with them, they'll send a full report back to our office. That part generally takes the longest when it comes to a new application. So if you are applying for a business, that's where you really want to stay on top of things, where if you need to get fingerprinted, you get that done. If you have to do the telephone interview, you respond to that quickly. Or if you have to get the CPTED done, that you set that up with the community liaison officer as soon as possible. Your new application will also often go through the Department of Neighborhood Services if you have a brick and mortar establishment here in the city, or if you're working out of your home. So the application goes to DNS. They review it to determine, do you have your occupancy permit for the location, or do you need a home occupation statement because it's a type of business that operates out of your home? Or they'll determine, do you have to go through the BOZA process, and if so, have you done that or not yet? Then they send back a short report to our office to let us know if there are requirements that need to be done first. Again, if you do have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals process, that has to be completed before your license application will be considered. So you want to check with BOZA often first. Another department that your application may go through is the health department. Obviously, this is more the case for food businesses, but there are different types of inspections that health department will do, and they'll let us know the results of that. There is a plan review process if there's new construction involved, so if you're building out a new kitchen, they can kind of advise you on what needs to be done there. All new food businesses and many other types of businesses have to go through a pre-inspection process with the health department as well, so that they can go out and check for safety. And then the final process that sometimes you have to go through with the health department is a variance. If you're doing something that's outside of the Wisconsin food code, they'll advise you through that process as well to apply for a variance through the state of Wisconsin. Finally comes your local council member. Applications generally go through one of two tracks where your application will be approved or denied by your local council member, or it'll go through a full committee and common council process. Your local council member is taking feedback from community groups, neighborhood meetings, phone and emails about your application. We see a lot of community feedback, so that's where you really want to be proactive and reach out to your local council member if you are applying for a business. They can be really good resources to let you know about community groups in the area that you should be connecting with, and they can also sometimes help you set up neighborhood meetings if it warrants one. So once your application has gone through all 4 of those departments, it's considered certified. Certain types of licenses at that point can just be issued. Others of them require a license committee and common council process. So once all 4 of those departments have signed off, you're either getting your license right away or you have to go through this separate process of the licenses committee. The committee meets in this room about every 3 weeks. So if you want to see what it feels like, you can have a seat at the front here when we're done. But it's made up of 5 alderpersons. They'll review your application and they'll give you an opportunity to come to the table, explain what you're going to do. We do have a lot of people from the community who show up and also provide feedback on, their concerns about the application. So that's where it comes in really extremely handy that you've reached out to those neighbors before you come here. At the end of your licenses committee hearing, the committee will make a recommendation to the full common council. The common council usually meets about 2 weeks after the licenses committee, and that's where the final approval or denial of your application will take place. Once the common council has approved your license, there are a couple of remaining requirements. Oftentimes we need to see a copy of your Wisconsin state seller's permit, confirm that you've registered your LLC or corporation with the state. These are all things that when you first file your application, our office will let you know that you need to do before your license can be issued. So that's the general process. I just wanted to let you know of a few resources that our office does offer. We have a red tape rescue program that was inspired a few years ago by a committee called the Local Business Action Team to try to make doing business in the city a little bit easier. There are a few flyers out there in case you want a little booklet, but it encompasses a few aspects of things that we try to do to make business easier here. The first is an application called StartSmart that our office and several other city departments worked on. You can go to the website here at milwaukee.gov/StartSmart. It's in both English and Spanish. You can basically go through a series of questions about your proposed business, and at the end, it'll give you a list of all of the licenses, permits, state requirements that you'll need to meet, as well as a list of resources for new business owners. The next program that we offer as part of Red Tape Rescue is Pivot. This is a roundtable that we get together quarterly. It involves the License Division, Department of Neighborhood Services, Health Department, City Attorney's Office, Police Department, community organizations, and representatives from the state, where we all get together, kind of go through best practices for businesses in the city, and answer questions about if you're a current business owner or proposed business owner, how can you do things best? The next one is actually next week, Monday, 9 a.m. at the Gerald Ignacy Center. If you do want to sign up, you can just send us an RSVP to pivot@milwaukee.gov, or you could take a look at one of those flyers or the website, and it'll give you information about it. The final part of Red Tape Rescue is Clerk Notes. This is actually a YouTube series that has about 3-minute videos that go through different parts of the license process. So we've got about 20, 30 videos out there now and are constantly growing the library that walk you through different processes with licenses. I'm gonna see if this works briefly. to give you kind of a short glance. I was told audio was working, but it's not. So if you do want to check it out, you just go to milwaukee.gov/red tape rescue, and it'll refer you to where all of the videos are. But as you can see, there's multiple videos in several different languages that you can review to get through the license process. Finally, just wanted to leave some contact info for us. Email is a great way to get a hold of us. Otherwise, you can call our office or, again, meet us downstairs on the first floor. We're in room 105. And we also have a Facebook page if you want to keep up to date on the latest news coming out of the license division. That's all I got.
Anyone has any questions about licensing or zoning or plan commission? You can ask them now.
I just have one question. This presentation, would any of this be online? Because it went by so fast, so.
You know, we can certainly make it available on our website, but I'll bet they probably want to put it on
We're going
the.
to take all the information and post it
Okay.
online.
Each of these workshops have been videotaped with the intention of putting it on the city's website to make it available for those who may not have been able to attend.
Yeah, if you go to milwaukee.gov/lunch and learn, it's on your forms there. The last 2 sessions are already posted, so you can rewatch those.
Other questions on zoning, board of zoning, or plan commission?
I think I heard you say that to get a liquor license for an establishment, you have to be a state resident. Is that the only type of license that you need to be a state resident for?
That is one of the types. The other type offhand that I'm thinking of is for secondhand dealer licenses to sell used goods, or pawn shop, or precious metal and gems, or to be like to drive a taxi or a limousine in the state. You also need to be a Wisconsin resident because you have to have the Wisconsin ID. If you go through, you know, if you're trying to start a business, the information sheets that come with the application will always specify requirements that the applicant needs to meet.
I have a question about the city plan commission process. I don't know what that was, but.
Kristen, yeah.
So you mentioned that after the public hearings, the recommendation is made to Z&D. So at that point, is that pretty much guaranteed between Z&D and council, or what kind of things is that?
So everyone who, like, every commission has their own vote. So I would never just assume that because something went through City Planning Commission, I would also go through it zoning, neighborhoods and development committee. And likewise, most of the time, I would say, I don't want to speak for the older people who sit on that committee, but from my experience, from what I've seen, generally, I would say that the committee's recommendations are taken by the full common council, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they consider it and discuss it on the floor as well. So until you get that final approval with a zoning change, I wouldn't guarantee anything. I know, are you thinking like from a permitting standpoint and timing
I'm just
standpoint?
thinking in general, just from seeing this process for the first time, what kind of things come up?
Sure. I mean, there are different discussions had at both committees, and then the full common council has the opportunity to discuss it if they wish as well. So I would say, yeah, until the end of the approval process and you get the full approval by the common council, I wouldn't assume any acceptance.
Other thoughts, other questions? Now's the time. About to end. So silence means no other questions. We have another lunch and learn that's going to occur in August. I believe you have a flyer. I'm not quite sure which one that is, but it will be a good one. August 20th? Yes, so occupancy. That's a very good topic. There are a lot of hurdles that people need to know about for occupancy for the establishment they're going to do. So stay tuned. August 20th, 12 o'clock here once again. If you have any other questions, you can see myself or others. Thank you. Alder.
Please fill out the surveys to help us as we continue to do this. Like I said, this is our first stab at this. We want to get better and bring more information to people. So your feedback is critical to how we design stuff for the future. And thank you all for coming.